The Vrathul were creatures of legend. Towering over most beings in the galaxy, their dark armored skin shimmered like obsidian under the light of distant suns. Their eyes glowed faintly, a sign of both wisdom and fearlessness. For centuries, no army, no species, and no weapon had ever made them tremble. They ruled over star systems with unshakable authority, their cities floating high above storm-racked gas giants, connected by bridges of living metal that pulsed with energy. To outsiders, they were untouchable, unstoppable, and utterly proud of it. On the edge of their empire, scouts patrolled a volatile asteroid belt near a dim star. The mission was routine: observe, report, and move on. Yet whispers had reached even these distant sentries, tales of a new species that dared to explore the stars with nothing but small ships and fragile bodies. Humans, they were called. Commander Vekra of the Vrathul fleet leaned over the holographic display, watching the small, unfamiliar vessels maneuver through asteroid fields. They were slow and tiny compared to Vrathul warships, yet they moved, with precision, dodging rocks that would crush any other ship. Vekra snorted. Fragile creatures. They cannot last long in space. They will fail as all weak species do. But even as she said it, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. There was something unusual about their movements, something that the Vrathul had never faced before. Not fearlessness, but a strange kind of cleverness. Back on the gas giant of GalacticPrime, the elders of the Vrathul Empire gathered in the Hall of Storms. Their bodies, massive and imposing, filled the chamber. Each step caused the floor to tremble slightly, a reminder of their sheer size and strength. They spoke in deep, resonant voices, debating the significance of the human arrival. "Why waste attention on such fragile beings?" asked Elder Karan, his voice like rolling thunder. "They cannot survive long in the void. No strategy of theirs can match ours." "Perhaps," another elder said, his tone cautious. "But our scouts report they survive where they should not. They improvise, adapt, and even turn dangers into opportunities. I have never seen such resilience in a creature so small." The council fell silent. They had seen many species rise and fall, yet none had ever displayed what the humans showed in mere reports: resourcefulness, courage, and the ability to act when hesitation would have been safer. For the first time, an elder felt unease, though none would admit it openly. Fearlessness was the foundation of Vrathul pride, and the idea that something or someone might challenge that shook even the strongest among them. Meanwhile, the human survey ship approached the edge of Vrathul space. Captain Aaron Callis, a human of wiry build but sharp mind, studied the planet below through the view screen. His crew worked efficiently, checking systems, scanning the atmosphere, and calculating landing coordinates. "Conditions are harsh," said Lieutenant Mara, glancing at the shifting storms below. "Strong winds, high pressure, and unpredictable lightning. Most species wouldn't dare land here." Aaron smiled. "Good. That means fewer eyes watching us. We'll take the first step, learn what we can, and adapt. That's how humans survive." It was that very adaptability that would soon astonish the Vrathul. As the humans descended, their small ships handled the violent winds and floating rock formations with a flexibility Vrathul machines could not replicate. They moved together, sharing information instantly, making adjustments in seconds. On the Vrathul frontier station, Vekra prepared her warriors to meet these new visitors. Her mind was filled with confidence. After all, the Vrathul had faced invaders, pirates, and deadly storms without flinching. The humans would be no different. When the humans finally stepped onto Vrathul soil, they moved with a curious calm. They did not cower under the shadows of the massive warriors or the roaring wind. Instead, they observed, smiled politely, and began their work. They touched controls, analyzed readings, and even attempted experiments with the local environment, all in ways that would seem chaotic to the Vrathul, but made perfect sense to the humans. Vekra watched closely, her arms crossed, trying to suppress the unease growing in her chest. They are small, fragile, nothing more, she told herself. Yet as the humans solved problems that would take her warriors weeks to understand, she could not hide the truth. These beings were unlike any she had encountered. One human, a young engineer named Tessa, climbed a jagged outcrop to repair a damaged sensor. The wind howled, lightning cracked nearby, and the rock beneath her feet threatened to crumble. Yet she moved confidently, adjusting the equipment with precise hands, humming softly to herself. From Vecra's vantage point, it looked impossible. How could such a small creature survive here without fear? The humans finished their tasks and gathered around the station's central console. They shared data, laughed quietly, and even offered gestures of respect toward the Vrathul present. The elders had long believed that respect was earned through strength and dominance, yet here was a species earning it through knowledge, courage, and cleverness. Qualities the Vrathul had rarely valued. Vecra could feel the stirrings of something unfamiliar. Pride, honor, and strength had always defined her, yet she could not deny the respect forming in her chest for these humans. They had faced what no one thought survivable and succeeded, not through brute power, but through ingenuity and courage. Back on the planet below, the humans explored further, mapping dangerous terrain and documenting anomalies. Every move they made defied the expectations of the Vrathul observers. When a sudden lightning storm struck, most species would retreat. Humans adjusted their shields, changed their positions, and even used the storm's energy to power their equipment. Vecra's warriors, trained for centuries to control fear and power, looked on in astonishment. By the end of the day, the elders convened again. For the first time, discussions were no longer about dismissing a new species. They were about understanding it. Elder Karan spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. They do not fight with claws or fire. They fight with the mind and spirit. Perhaps we have underestimated what it means to be fearless. Vecra felt a chill. Fearlessness had always been their greatest weapon, yet the humans demonstrated that fearlessness could take new forms that even the mightiest Vrathul could not predict. As night fell over GalacticPrime, the storm above the floating cities raged with renewed intensity. Yet in the heart of the Vrathul capital, the first seeds of change had been planted. Humans, fragile and seemingly weak, had arrived. And for the first time in millennia, the untouchable Titans felt something they could not control: uncertainty. Vecra returned to her quarters, pacing slowly. She could still hear the hum of the humans' equipment in her mind, see the precision in their movements, and feel the courage radiating from being so small. For centuries, she had known no fear. For centuries, the Vrathul had believed they were unmatched, but now she realized the galaxy had shifted. Something new had arrived, and it was not strength alone that defined it. It was courage, ingenuity, and a spirit that refused to yield. Looking out at the storm-lit sky, Vecra whispered to herself, almost in awe, "Perhaps we have been wrong. Perhaps fearlessness has more than one form." And far below, the humans rested, unaware of the impact they had made. To them, it was another mission, another day of exploration. Yet unknowingly, they had begun a transformation in a civilization that had never known fear. A transformation that would change the course of the galaxy forever. The Vrathul had always believed themselves untouchable. But the humans had arrived, small and fragile, and had already begun to prove that true courage was something no armor could defend against, no weapon could destroy, and no legend could contain. The first contact had ended, but the story of change was only beginning. The storm over GalacticPrime had calmed, leaving a silver mist that swirled across the floating cities of the Vrathul. The humans, small and fragile compared to the massive warriors of the planet, moved among the giant structures with surprising confidence. They were not soldiers or conquerors. They were explorers, scientists, and engineers, yet their courage and cleverness drew more attention than any weapon could. Commander Vecra stood on the observation deck of the frontier station, watching the humans' activities with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. They moved together with a harmony that reminded her of a well-trained Vrathul unit, yet they carried no heavy weapons, no armor, and no visible defenses. They simply adapted. "Watch closely," Vecra said to a group of young warriors beside her. See how they survive in conditions we would consider deadly. The warriors snorted, clearly skeptical. They had survived storms far stronger, lightning strikes more intense, and hostile alien attacks far worse than anything humans had faced. Yet as the humans continued to navigate the unstable platforms and shifting winds of the frontier station, even the skeptics felt a strange stirring of respect. One human, a young man named Jalen, approached a damaged observation tower. The structure leaned dangerously, its supports cracked by years of storms. Any misstep could send him plummeting hundreds of meters into the swirling mist below. "Careful, Jalen," called Mara, his partner, over the roar of the wind. "Those supports won't hold if—" "I know," he said calmly, ignoring the tremors in the metal underfoot. "We can fix this. Just help me reroute the stabilizers." The warriors around Vecra gasped when Jalen began attaching improvised braces to the structure. With a few careful adjustments and some quick calculations, the tower stabilized. To the Vrathul, it was a miracle. A human, fragile and small, had survived a fall that would have killed even a seasoned warrior. Vecra felt her chest tighten. She had always believed fearlessness came from strength, size, and endurance. Yet here was a species thriving where others would perish, relying not on power but on intelligence, courage, and teamwork. "Do you see it?" she asked quietly. "This is not luck. They calculate, adapt, and act without hesitation. They do not fear failure, they embrace it." The elders of the Vrathul watched from the safety of their chambers. Through the station's observation systems, they saw humans working calmly among hazards that would have made most species retreat. Elder Karan's voice rumbled through the council chamber. "They are persistent," he admitted, "perhaps even cleverer than we imagined. But they are fragile. Fragile does not mean fearless." Yet, even as he spoke, the council screen showed Mara directing a group of Vrathul technicians who had become trapped on a platform during a sudden electrical storm. The humans guided them, shouting instructions, pointing out weak supports, and offering tools. The Vrathul, trained to act alone in combat, struggled to follow these unfamiliar methods. Slowly they adapted, saving themselves without the humans ever touching them. It was a small victory, but to the Vrathul, it felt monumental. The humans had not used power or fear to command. They had used knowledge and courage. Later, the humans explored a cavern beneath the station, a place few Vrathul had ever entered. The passages were narrow, slick, and unstable. Ancient Vrathul machinery lined the walls, some sparking with energy and threatening to collapse at any moment. Yet the humans moved with care and determination, carefully testing each step and documenting every detail. "See how they observe?" Vecra said to a group of warriors. "They do not rush. They do not assume they are invincible. They respect danger, but they do not let it stop them. There is bravery in that." One human, Tessa, paused at a crumbling platform. She studied the weak supports, then looked up at the drop below. With precise movements, she rigged a temporary harness system that allowed her team to cross safely. To a Vrathul, it seemed like magic. No brute force, no armor, no strength, only intelligence, quick thinking, and courage. "Impossible," muttered a young warrior. "No creature can survive that without fear." "Perhaps that is the point," Vecra said softly. "Fear does not vanish because you are strong. Fear is managed with courage, wit, and action. They understand this better than we do." The humans' presence began to stir curiosity among the Vrathul civilians as well. Scholars, engineers, and even merchants came to observe. Humans spoke with respect, asked questions, and offered insights that often challenged centuries-old Vrathul methods. They did not demand obedience. They did not boast of power. They simply showed how to approach problems differently, and the Vrathul could not help but notice. The turning point came when a sudden quake shook the station. Massive support beams cracked, alarms blared, and the humans found themselves surrounded by falling debris. Instinctively, Vecra's warriors prepared to strike, expecting to rescue or fight. But the humans reacted quickly, signaling and directing each other and the Vrathul around them. Using small tools, ropes, and clever positioning, they created safe pathways and guided everyone to secure areas. When the dust settled, not a single human was harmed. Several Vrathul had minor injuries, but they were alive, and they had witnessed something extraordinary. Humans navigating extreme danger without armor, without overwhelming strength, and without hesitation. The elders convened again, their voices unusually quiet. Elder Karan spoke first, his tone reflecting a mixture of awe and concern. They do not fight as we fight. They survive where we would fail. This is not strength, it is courage, intelligence, and adaptability combined. Perhaps we have underestimated them. Vecra nodded, feeling a new respect for these beings. She had trained for centuries to be fearless, yet she had never faced anything like the humans. They did not need to overpower their environment or their enemies. They changed it, adapted to it, and thrived despite its dangers. That evening, as the silver mist settled over the floating cities, the humans gathered around a small fire in a protected area. They shared food, exchanged stories, and laughed quietly, unaware of the impact they had made on the Vrathul observers above. Vecra watched them, realizing that true fearlessness was not about size or armor. It was about facing the unknown, acting with purpose, and refusing to be paralyzed by danger. Humans embodied a kind of courage that Vrathul warriors had rarely considered, a courage rooted in intellect, empathy, and quick thinking. For the first time, Vecra felt uncertainty in her role as a warrior. She had always believed that fearlessness came from dominance, power, and indestructibility. Yet the humans demonstrated that fearlessness could take other forms that were not less than Vrathul's strength, only different. By the end of the day, the Vrathul began to whisper among themselves. Soldiers, engineers, and scholars alike discussed the humans' bravery, their cleverness, and their determination. A quiet admiration spread through the frontier station. For a species that had believed itself untouchable, it was a humbling experience. Vecra returned to her quarters, still watching the human team through observation feeds. She saw them laugh, argue, plan, and solve problems, all while facing conditions that would have daunted even her. She understood now that strength alone was not enough to survive in the galaxy. Adaptability, courage, and intelligence were equally powerful, and far below the humans rested, unaware of the ripple they had caused. They thought only of their mission to explore, learn, and adapt. Yet in doing so, they had challenged centuries of Vrathul tradition, showing a new way to face the dangers of the universe. Vecra stood by her window, gazing at the swirling mists and distant stars. She realized that the Vrathul, for all their strength and armor, had something to learn. Humans were small, fragile, and yet extraordinary. They carried a spark that could change even the most fearsome species. For the first time in millennia, the Vrathul began to question what it truly meant to be fearless. And in that questioning, a story began. A story of courage, ingenuity, and the arrival of a species that would change everything. The humans had not yet fought, not yet conquered, not yet proven themselves in war, but in their very presence they had already begun to reshape the minds of a civilization that had never known fear. The first contact was over, yet the shock it delivered would echo through the Vrathul Empire forever. The untouchable titans had met a new kind of strength, and the galaxy had taken notice. The morning sun barely broke through the thick clouds over GalacticPrime, casting the floating cities in a muted silver light. For centuries, the Vrathul had faced storms, earthquakes, and alien attacks with unwavering confidence, relying on their immense strength, armor, and precision. Yet this day would test them in ways they had never imagined. A sudden tremor shook the frontier station. Metal groaned, lights flickered, and alarms screamed. A massive storm was forming in the gas giant's upper atmosphere, a violent phenomenon that could collapse entire platforms within minutes. Vrathul soldiers rushed to positions, ready to brace against the inevitable. They were trained for disaster, yet even they felt a rare unease. Captain Aaron Callis, standing beside Mara and Tessa, calmly assessed the situation. "It's bad," he said, "but we can handle this. Everyone follow my lead and we'll make it through safely." Vecra watched from her observation post. She saw her warriors preparing defenses, shouting orders, and forming lines of strength as they always did. Yet the humans moved differently. They did not build walls or form ranks. Instead, they surveyed the station, pointed out weak points, and began reorganizing structures, creating safe paths and redirecting energy to maintain critical systems. One Vrathul technician shouted, "That is useless. The storm will destroy everything before you can act." Jalen, the human engineer, smiled. "We won't survive by standing still. We survive by moving, adapting, and using what we have. Follow me." And they did. Slowly, Vrathul soldiers hesitated, then followed the humans' guidance. It was unusual for a Vrathul to take orders from a smaller species, Yet the logic was undeniable. The humans' quick thinking kept workers safe and minimized damage. The storm intensified. Lightning struck nearby platforms, shaking the foundations. Floating bridges swayed dangerously. A Vrathul soldier, massive and armored, froze for a moment, something he had never done in his life. A human calmly tossed a stabilizing device across the platform, anchoring the beams in seconds. Vekra's jaw tightened. She had trained her entire life to remain fearless, but she had never witnessed courage combined with intelligence like this. The humans did not charge recklessly, nor did they hide. They acted strategically, with creativity that matched the fury of nature itself. "Look at how they manage the storm," she whispered to her young warriors. "They do not overpower it, they work with it. That is true courage." The situation worsened when a secondary quake caused a section of the station's energy conduits to collapse. Sparks flew, threatening to ignite the fuel reserve stored below. Panic spread among the Vrathul engineers. Traditional protocols would have slowed response, waiting for commands, securing perimeters, and risking precious time. Tessa moved immediately. "Everyone this way. Follow the ropes." She threw a rope across the damaged conduits and guided the engineers along the safest path. Using simple tools and quick thinking, she redirected the failing energy lines into storage units designed to absorb the overflow. It worked. The fuel was saved, the station system stabilized, and the Vrathul watched, stunned, as a human had solved a problem that would have taken their experts hours, if not days. Even Vekra, proud and strong, felt a new kind of respect. She had always believed that brute force and fearlessness alone defined survival, but the humans demonstrated something different: quick adaptation, calm assessment, and the courage to act under extreme pressure. The storm raged on, but the humans remained steady. They divided the Vrathul into teams, giving precise instructions and using each warrior's strengths to their advantage. It was teamwork like the Vrathul had never seen. Where they relied on raw power, the humans relied on observation and planning. Where they expected fearlessness in the face of danger, the humans inspired courage through guidance and clarity. Elder Karan, watching through the station's observation system, felt a growing unease. "This is not how battles are fought," he murmured. "Yet they succeed. They thrive where we would struggle." Vekra noticed her young warriors whispering among themselves, questioning their old beliefs. They were learning something new. Strength alone was not enough to survive the galaxy. Intelligence, creativity, and courage could turn the tide against any challenge. The storm's peak brought the most danger. A massive floating rock, torn from the upper atmosphere by violent winds, barreled toward the station. Any impact would devastate entire platforms. Vrathul soldiers readied for combat, preparing to shield key structures with sheer strength. Aaron assessed the trajectory. "We can't stop it with force, but we can change its path." He directed the humans to anchor large energy arrays to the ground and use them to generate a controlled magnetic field. With careful adjustments, the field nudged the rock slightly, diverting it just enough to miss the most vulnerable platforms. The humans had not destroyed the threat. They had adapted to it, worked with it, and used ingenuity instead of power. Vekra could hardly believe her eyes. Humans, fragile as they were, had managed to manipulate forces that had always threatened even her massive warriors. And they did it calmly, without arrogance or fear. When the storm finally subsided, the damage was minimal. Platforms swayed, a few minor systems failed, but lives were saved and the station remained operational. The Vrathul, warriors who had faced countless dangers without flinching, were shaken, not because they had failed, but because they had learned something they could not unlearn. Humans had a new kind of fearlessness, one born of courage, wit, and adaptability. Vekra gathered her warriors. "Do you see it now?" she asked. "It is not just strength that protects us. It is action, planning, and the courage to face what we cannot control. They are small, fragile, and yet they accomplish what giants cannot." The young warriors nodded, a quiet respect forming in their eyes. The lesson was clear. Fearlessness could take many forms, and humans embodied a version that Vrathul strength alone could never teach. Later, the humans gathered in a secure chamber, reviewing data, repairing equipment, and sharing insights with the Vrathul engineers. They did not boast or claim superiority, they simply worked, observed, and guided. Their humility, combined with undeniable results, left a lasting impression on everyone present. Elder Karan, addressing the council remotely, admitted something he had never said before. We have underestimated them. Humans are not strong like us, but they are fearless in ways we cannot yet comprehend. We must observe carefully. Vecra watched the humans laugh quietly among themselves, sharing stories of their journey, their mistakes, and their successes. To them it had been another mission, another challenge. Yet their very presence had reshaped the minds of the Vrathul. That night, as GalacticPrime's storms receded and the silver mist returned, the Vrathul slept uneasily. For centuries they had known no fear, relying on their strength, size, and skill. But now the humans had shown them that fearlessness could also come from cleverness, courage, and collaboration. Vecra stood at her observation deck, gazing at the stars. The humans had survived a storm that would have killed many Vrathul. They had guided her warriors, solved impossible problems, and inspired courage without demanding respect or obedience. For the first time, she realized that the galaxy was larger, stranger, and more complex than her training had ever prepared her for. Strength was not the only measure of power. Courage, creativity, and adaptability were equally vital, and humans had them in abundance. And far below, the humans rested peacefully, unaware of the ripple they had caused through Vrathul society. They had not fought battles, conquered territories, or displayed brute strength. Yet they had achieved something more subtle, more powerful. They had reshaped the perception of a species that had believed itself untouchable. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. The Vrathul would never be the same. For the first time, they understood that fearlessness was not just the absence of fear. It was the courage to face danger with intelligence, creativity, and calm resolve. The humans had come as visitors, explorers and engineers, but in their actions they had become teachers, showing the Vrathul that survival and courage were not always about size or power. And as the stars shone brightly over GalacticPrime, one truth became clear. Humanity had arrived, and everything was about to change. The calm after the storm was short-lived. Vrathul scouts reported movement on the edges of the Empire's borders, a fleet of the Ralith, a rival alien species known for their aggression and cunning. They had long observed the Vrathul's strength from afar, waiting for a chance to strike at the supposedly untouchable Titans. Commander Vecra stood on the observation deck, watching the approaching enemy ships. Their sleek, dark hulls shimmered ominously against the backdrop of stars. The Vrathul prepared their traditional defenses, massive warships, energy shields, and perfectly trained warriors ready to meet any threat with brute force. "We've faced invaders before," one young warrior said confidently. "We'll crush them as always." Vecra's eyes narrowed. She had confidence in her warriors, but she had also learned from the humans that strength alone was no longer enough. "This time," she said, "we do not fight alone. We will use every advantage, every strategy, and every mind at our disposal. Humans fight differently. They see things we cannot." The humans had been monitoring the situation too. Captain Aaron Callis and his team assessed the enemy fleet, mapping weak points and predicting attack patterns. Unlike the Vrathul, who relied on overwhelming power and shock tactics, the humans focused on strategy, coordination, and flexibility. "They're fast," Aaron said, pointing to a cluster of Ralith vessels. "But they have blind spots. We can turn their strengths against them if we act quickly." Vecra watched as humans moved among the Vrathul units, offering suggestions on positioning, energy flow management, and coordinated maneuvers. The warriors grumbled at first. They were used to following orders from their own commanders, not small, fragile beings. Yet the humans' ideas worked and the results were undeniable. When the Ralith attacked, chaos erupted. Explosions rocked the outskirts of Vrathul space. Traditional strategies, relying on sheer force, faltered as the enemy used speed and deception. Vrathul warships found themselves outmaneuvered, their rigid formations exploited by the agile Ralith ships. Humans acted swiftly. Using detailed observations and quick calculations, they advised the Vrathul on unconventional tactics, feints, diversions, and unexpected formations that leveraged the strengths of the Vrathul, while compensating for their weaknesses. They guided the warriors to act unpredictably, a concept the Vrathul had rarely considered. Vecra led a combined squadron of Vrathul and humans, executing maneuvers that seemed reckless at first. They split into smaller units, appearing vulnerable to lure the enemy into traps, yet each move was carefully calculated. The humans had studied the Rayleigh patterns and predicted their responses. One massive Vrathul warship, normally unstoppable in direct assault, was guided by human strategy to bait a group of enemy ships into a gravity field. With precision timing, energy nets deployed and the Rayleigh vessels became trapped, their momentum turned against them. The Vrathul warriors cheered, astonished at the humans' ingenuity. Vecra felt a surge of pride, not in her own strength, but in the teamwork that had turned the tide. Humans did not wield raw power, yet they could orchestrate an outcome that even the mightiest Vrathul could not achieve alone. During the battle, Tessa directed small squads to sabotage key Rayleigh systems, using clever improvisations and minimal resources. The Vrathul watched in amazement as a few humans disabled entire groups of enemy vessels without firing a single traditional weapon. The combination of human ingenuity and Vrathul might created a synergy no enemy had expected. As the battle raged, the Rayleigh commander realized too late that their strategy had been anticipated. Each move they made was countered not just by strength but by insight and adaptability. The humans had taught the Vrathul to think beyond brute force, to act unpredictably, and to use intelligence as a weapon. Finally, the Rayleigh retreated, their fleet scattered and damaged. Vrathul space was secure, but the victory felt different. It was not just the triumph of power. It was a triumph of strategy, courage, and collaboration. Elder Karan, observing from the council chambers, spoke for the first time with genuine respect. They have changed the way we fight. Humans, small and fragile, have led us to victory not by force but by mind and courage. We have underestimated them for too long. Vecra approached the human team, her massive frame dwarfing them, yet her voice carried a tone of admiration. Your tactics, your courage, it is unlike anything we have known. You have changed us, Aaron smiled. We just do what we must to survive. You fight with strength, we fight with creativity. Together we are unstoppable. The Vrathul warriors, once rigid in tradition, began to see the value of human methods. They practiced new strategies, combined their power with human insight, and learned to anticipate rather than merely react. It was a lesson in humility, courage, and adaptability. That night, Vecra walked among the warriors, reflecting on what had happened. For centuries, they had believed themselves untouchable, fearless because of their strength and discipline. Yet the humans had shown them that true fearlessness was not the absence of danger. It was the courage to face danger with wit, intelligence, and calm resolve. Even the youngest Vrathul warriors were eager to learn from the humans. They asked questions, observed techniques, and tried new approaches in simulations. Fearlessness had taken on a new meaning in Vrathul culture. It was no longer just the ability to endure. It was the ability to adapt, innovate, and act with precision under pressure. Far below, the humans rested after the battle, unaware of the deep impact they had on Vrathul society. To them it had been another day of problem-solving, teamwork, and courage. Yet in their calm and clever actions, they had transformed the perceptions of a species that had once believed itself invincible. Vecra stood at her observation deck, looking at the stars. The Vrathul had faced countless enemies, but never one that reshaped their very understanding of fear and courage. Humans had arrived, small and fragile, yet they had proven that power alone was not enough to survive the universe. Across the Empire, whispers spread. Soldiers, scholars, and civilians spoke of the humans' bravery and ingenuity. They discussed strategies, shared stories of the battle, and quietly acknowledged that a new era had begun. The Vrathul would never again rely solely on strength. They had learned that intelligence, courage, and collaboration could break even the unbreakable. Vecra returned to her quarters, her thoughts racing. The humans had taught her warriors something far more important than any battle: the meaning of true fearlessness. It was not about being stronger than all others. It was about facing challenges boldly, thinking creatively, and never underestimating the unexpected. And far below, the humans slept peacefully, unaware of the transformation they had inspired. They had not conquered the Vrathul, nor did they intend to. They had simply acted, adapted, and inspired, showing a civilization that had believed itself untouchable that the universe had room for new kinds of courage. The Rayleigh threat had passed, but the lessons remained. Vrathul society had begun to shift. influenced by small, brave humans who had shown them a new way to fight, survive, and think. The untouchable titans were no longer the same. In the quiet aftermath, Vecra whispered to herself, almost in awe, "Strength alone is not enough. True fearlessness comes from courage, creativity, and action. They have taught us that." And as the stars of Kareth Prime shone brightly above, the humans' presence was felt not as a threat, but as a beacon of change. The galaxy had begun to take notice. For the first time, a small species had challenged the unshakable pride of the Vrathul, and had emerged not as conquerors, but as teachers. In the heart of the galaxy, where stars burned like jewels in the endless black, the apex predators ruled. Mighty, ancient, and feared, they had never known defeat. Civilizations across countless star systems bowed to their will, or were destroyed for daring to resist. To them, the humans were nothing more than a curiosity, primitive, fragile, and laughably weak. Yet humanity had a habit of proving the impossible possible. Aboard the human exploration ship Odyssey, Captain Elara Kane surveyed the distant cluster of stars ahead. The sleek silver hull reflected the glow of nebulae as the ship drifted silently through space. Her crew moved efficiently around her, adjusting instruments, checking coordinates, and monitoring communications. Everything appeared routine, but Elara knew better. This mission was anything but ordinary. "Status report," she called, her voice calm but commanding. "Sector clear, Captain," replied Lieutenant Aaron, glancing at a holographic display. "No hostile activity detected." "Communications are stable," Elara nodded. "Good, keep it that way." Her mind, however, was already racing ahead. The humans were entering a part of the galaxy no one of their kind had ever dared. This was apex predator territory, where humans were considered not even a blip on the radar. From the corner of her eye, the radar flickered, and a new signal appeared. It was faint at first, but growing rapidly. "Unknown vessel approaching, Captain," Aaron said. "It's large and heavily armed." Elara's eyes narrowed. "Show me." On the main display, a massive warship loomed, black and jagged like a predator's claw. Its surface shimmered with energy shields that seemed impervious. The ship's design was unmistakable. It belonged to the apex predators. "They've seen us," Elara said quietly. "And they're coming to greet us." The humans had trained for encounters like this, but training could not erase the tension that gripped the bridge. These creatures had toppled entire civilizations. They had never faced humans in direct conflict, but that did not mean they were merciful. "Prepare evasive maneuvers," Elara ordered. "And keep weapons ready. I don't want to start a war, but I won't run from one either." The Predator's warship moved closer, sleek and unstoppable. Suddenly a voice cut through the communication channels, deep, guttural, and dripping with arrogance. "Humans," it sneered. "You dare enter our territory. Prepare to be destroyed." Elara's jaw tightened. "They don't know what they're dealing with," she muttered under her breath. The ship trembled as the Predators fired a warning beam, slicing through space with deadly precision. The Odyssey rocked violently, alarms blaring. "Shields holding at 60%, Aaron shouted. "Evasive patterns Delta and Gamma," Elara commanded. "Full throttle." The humans twisted their ship through a series of tight maneuvers, weaving between asteroids and debris. The Predators were fast, but human ingenuity was faster. The aliens had expected fear, expected panic. Instead, they found calm, precision, and a skill they had never anticipated. Minutes passed like hours. The humans danced through the trap, dodging energy blasts that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Elara's mind raced, calculating angles, timing, and escape routes. Finally, with a daring maneuver that bordered on impossible, the Odyssey slipped past the Predator's blockade and accelerated into a hidden warp corridor. The warship pursued for only a few seconds before losing them entirely. "Status?" Elara asked, breathless but steady. "Shields at 40%, engines overheating," Aaron reported. "But we're safe. For now." Elara let out a slow breath. "Good, alert the fleet command. They need to know we've been seen." She knew the Predators would laugh at this encounter. They would boast to one another about how they had greeted the humans. They could not yet understand that human strength was not measured in sheer firepower. It was in strategy, adaptability, and the unyielding will to survive. Meanwhile, in the Predator warship, the alien commander bared his teeth in irritation. "Insignificant humans," they escaped. "But it will not happen again. They will learn their place. Unknown to the predators, the humans were not just surviving, they were learning. Every encounter provided knowledge, every near miss strengthened their resolve. Humanity had been underestimated once, and that was a mistake that would not be repeated. Back aboard the Odyssey, Alara convened a strategy meeting with her senior officers. The holographic display projected a three-dimensional map of predator-controlled space, dotted with star systems, fleets, and supply lines. "They laughed at us," she said, her voice steady but filled with fire. "They think we are weak, slow, and predictable. They are wrong. We adapt, we survive, and soon they will realize that humanity is not a species to be dismissed." Lieutenant Aaron leaned forward. "Captain, do you really think we can stand against them? They are, well, apex predators. They've never known defeat." Alara met his gaze. "Apex predators?" she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Maybe, but every predator has a weakness. Every empire has a flaw, and every enemy, no matter how strong, underestimates the human heart." Her officers nodded, understanding that words were only part of the battle. Action would speak louder. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, from hostile planets to natural disasters, and each time they had emerged stronger. Now they faced a predator that had never faced them before, and that was their advantage. In the darkness of space, a single human ship became a spark. The galaxy had never seen humans in their full strength, and the predators were about to discover just how dangerous that spark could become. The humans prepared quietly, gathering resources, upgrading their systems, and refining strategies. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. They studied predator tactics, weaknesses, and patterns, learning to anticipate the moves of an enemy that considered them irrelevant. And somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, the predators continued to laugh. They laughed at the humans' audacity, laughed at their resilience, and laughed at the thought that these fragile creatures might ever threaten them. But the predators did not know the truth. Humans were not fragile. Humans were not predictable. Humans were not afraid. The war had not yet begun, but when it did, the galaxy would remember the name of every human who dared to defy the apex predators. Captain Alara Kane stood on the bridge, looking at the endless stars ahead. Each one represented a challenge, a risk, and an opportunity. She knew the path would be dangerous. She knew that many would doubt them, and that the predators would not relent easily. But she also knew something stronger. Humanity had something no predator had: creativity, courage, and an unbreakable spirit. The galaxy may have laughed at them, but laughter would soon turn to shock. The humans were ready, and humanity would not stop until the apex. Predators learned the true cost of underestimating them.